Hey everybody, welcome to the In All Things podcast. It's time to see God in everything. What is going on, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of the In All Things podcast. We were off last week, but we are back, and we're very excited to be here with you. If you're watching or listening, thanks for being here. My name is Mitch Frost, and as usual, not always, but usual, I'm here with Pastor Steve Markle. Good morning. How are you, sir?
Good morning. I'm great today. How are you?
I'm good. You're great.
I'm great.
What makes today great?
Yesterday was an awesome day at church, so I'm always in a good mood on Monday mornings when Sunday was good. We had a lot of first-time guests, met a lot of new people, gave a lot of gift bags away to first-time guests, so that felt good. The crowd at the 11 o'clock service was one of the best ones we've had since COVID, so yeah, that felt good. Yeah, it's a good day.
It was sunny for the most part.
It was sunny,
so
yeah. Woke up this morning to my alarm clock. You know, that sounds like normal, but that's not. Usually I'm laying there awake before it goes off. So woke up to the alarm clock early and then went to the gym, had a good workout this morning, so ready to go.
There you go.
Yeah, how about you?
Good. Can't complain. Last night was awesome at the well as well. Lots of new students there too, so maybe some overflow from the morning, I'm not sure, but I think we had 4 or 5 new students last night, so that's pretty cool. Yeah. But it was just a good night. Everything was good, and kicked off a new series there because it's Easter season. We're in April now, so less than 2 weeks from now, Easter will be over.
Correct.
So that's kind of weird to think about. I feel like the year just started. It always happens, but this year is like
it feels like it snuck
level.
up on us a little bit. I don't know. It doesn't make sense.
But anyway, so how do you feel like the series is going at church? Challenge the norm. We're heading towards Easter in the book of Mark. So how do you think it's going?
I would say it's always challenging when you do a longer series, like 7 weeks like we're doing. But I felt really good about it. We've gone through the book of Mark, like we said, and culminates on Easter. So every week's been different. Some weeks, miracles of Jesus. Some weeks, his teaching. This is just amazing things that he said that really flipped culture on its head. So I think the feedback I've gotten has been great. People really love when we go through a book of the Bible like this. And, of course, like I've said, 16 chapters in Mark, and we're doing 7 weeks of sermons. So you got to read all the in-between parts to get it all. But how do you think it's going?
Good. I think it's going well. It's been a while since we've done like a 7-week walk through a book of the Bible like this here at Sycamore. So it's pretty cool. And I think everybody, believer or not, kind of likes stories about Jesus.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like, I kind of like this.
Yeah, some people told me yesterday, what was the story that I covered?
It was camel and needle.
Yeah, I know. I blanked for a moment. The story of the rich young ruler. And some people said, I love that you explained some of those things that Jesus said, because I've always wondered, what did he mean by that? Like, a rich person can't get saved, how hard it is. So anyway, it was good to try to go through that and just explain things in a way I think that people understand. But most importantly, the message of the gospel is just all over that. So that's what Jesus is all about. So yeah,
good stuff.
It's been good. What's your Easter series you're doing?
We are doing a series called Saturday, but not spelled like the day Saturday.
Yes.
It's sadder, like sad, the emotion day.
Tricky.
Last couple years, talking about Easter and kind of working on Easter for the first time on a church staff and all those things, I just can't get my mind off of what Saturday must have been like for everybody involved. And so we're doing a 2-week series that we're not going to talk about Easter Sunday at all because I'm inviting all of them to come to Easter Sunday. So
correct.
And so we're kind of painting the picture from the garden up until, really Sunday morning, like before he came back. So, because that time must have been pretty challenging. The more you think about it and put yourselves in the shoes, like disciples didn't know Sunday was coming.
No.
Well, from our side of history where we are, we know Sunday, Jesus was only in the grave, but they didn't know that.
No.
And so you got to think about just the emotions of what they felt, and mixed with probably being in hiding and being scared because they were next. And
all of that.
There's just so much. And so I don't know, I've been really into that idea a little bit.
Right.
And so we're doing a series on it, and it's been,
and
last night was good. So
you only get 2 weeks because you guys always don't have the well on Easter Sunday night because obviously people with their families. So so that's cool. I love that.
So it's fun. It's something different. It's a different take on Easter. Yeah. So we're like really what I'm doing. And last night my message was really just telling the story. Like I'm just descriptively telling the story leading up to these different things. Okay. So it's kind of fun, kind of different. Yeah. And then last week was busy here at the church as a whole. We had refuel on Tuesday. Yeah. How did you feel? How did you feel about after that or about that?
Good. It went really well. Refuel was an all-day conference that we had 4 main sessions with 4 main speakers, 2 breakout sessions, and a lunch in there. It was packed for 6 hours,
Yeah.
but all the feedback has been awesome. All 4 speakers that we had, main speakers, were awesome. Just different styles, different approaches, and everybody just loved it. So yeah, it was a busy day. It was a busy week. Going back the last week and a half has just been, I feel like, just a sprint through one thing after the other, setting up, tearing down. But it's good. I love to see our building alive.
Yeah.
And it is every Sunday, but it's nice to see some other things happening too.
Yeah, we went straight from Refuel to the IF gathering, which
Yes.
happened here on Friday and Saturday. And the feedback I've heard from that has just been amazing.
Yeah, none of
Like,
us in the room
amazing.
were there, but
Nope.
Jared was there. He was the male.
Davey
rep.
was there taking pictures a little bit.
Yes, for a little bit, but
But if you don't know what IF
Yeah.
Gathering is, that's something. Her name is Jenny Allen, and she kind of puts on this conference every year. I don't know where it's actually hosted. I don't know where they
I feel like it was Texas, but I'm not sure.
Maybe Texas. And then they do, satellite. You can stream and stuff like that. So we put on one here at Sycamore. 88 women signed
It was
up?
about 80.
80? Okay.
Yeah.
And I've just heard awesome things.
Yeah, yeah.
From everybody I've talked to. So
shout out to my wife for leading, and there's a lot of organization within that. She had a great team helping her, but it went off really well, and there was so much positivity about that as well. So. Yeah, and it's funny. Yesterday morning, I saw a lot of the women in church like hugging each other. I'm like, well, you still have the retreat hangover, and they're like, yeah, man, it was awesome. They probably didn't say yeah, man, but
they said, yeah, man.
Yeah, man,
bro.
it was awesome. Hey,
Yeah.
bro. No, anyway.
But yeah, busy week.
Yeah, excited for that.
And mixed in the middle of there, just in our world as a whole, right? March Madness is coming to an end.
Yeah,
So,
tonight.
game tonight, right?
Tonight.
We got North Carolina and Kansas.
That's right. That's right.
Do you feel on either side?
No,
or you just kinda-
if I was a betting person, I'd bet it on Kansas because I think North Carolina kind of celebrated beating Duke as if they won the championship on Saturday night. So I think they may not be. I don't know. I don't think they're going to be as up for this game as they were Saturday. And Kansas just looked dominant on Saturday. So but anything can happen.
You never know.
It's
that's
one
that's
game.
what's so much fun about March Madness.
Yeah.
They come in hot, and that's it.
I know. You never know. I really, really wanted, and I'm not a Duke fan at all, but I kind of thought it'd be cool for Coach K to just go out as a winner, winning the
his last
championship.
year, yeah.
75 years old, still coaching, and all that he's done. But no, it didn't happen. So, oh well.
Oh well.
Yeah.
On top of that, we have the Oscars drama.
Yeah,
we're not going to talk about this.
I
for
know.
long,
We're like a week
but I
late
do want to
to
bring
it.
it up.
Yeah, we couldn't do a podcast last week because of the schedule.
Right.
There was just too much going on here,
Right.
and Monday morning is when we record, and it would have been like the perfect time to talk about that. But
I mean, everyone and their mom has weighed in on this by this point, and like so many podcasts have come out with whole episodes breaking down what happened, and I'm just like, okay, let's take a step back.
Yeah,
like we don't need to psychoanalyze.
No,
this
I think I've changed my view on it
TV.
like multiple times. I was
Yeah.
first like, he's wrong. I'm like, okay.
But when it comes down to it, it was a moment, right? It was an emotional moment that happened.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of shocked that it's still the topic everywhere. Like it's just like, oh, come on. Like there's bigger things happening in the world a little bit.
Let's be honest. I mean, people are dying like crazy in the Ukraine. That war is still going on. We're like 40 some days into it. And people are kind of sadly, I don't know, like bored with that. And they'd rather talk about, the slap than they talk. And I get it because it's sad, but it's just, there's so many other things going on in the world. And not that we should just sit here and talk about war and that, but that is much more of a serious topic than what Will Smith did to Chris Rock.
Yeah. No, I will say it was crazy. Me and Davey were watching live, so
you're one of the few
live.
because the numbers are declining every year.
Last couple years,
it's gotten less and less watched.
But
this will help.
I'm a big movie guy, and so we watched the Oscars. Got McDonald's in my basement watching the Oscars. It was fun. We've done it before, and we're sitting there watching it, and this moment happens, and it was kind of like looking at each other, like, wait, was that fake? Did that? And then they cut the audio, and it was just like, oh my gosh, that really just happened.
But you really probably, I feel like if I was watching it live, I probably would have thought it was staged at first.
Yeah, we did.
Right?
Yeah, it looked fake.
First. Well, and the first time when I woke up Monday morning and all these, messages, updates and alerts, and I was like watching it, I was like, first thought, absolutely staged. But then when I listened to the Japanese version that was uncensored, and I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just, it was a moment. It's funny because I've witnessed a few fights in my life at school, high school and stuff.
Yeah.
And like, there's the feeling when you're like in the same room as a fight, like, you can feel your heartbeat in your throat and you're kind of like, that's what it felt like watching this happen live.
Right.
Like, did that really just happen?
I know.
Like, it's just crazy. And then he wins, Best Actor of the Year, which is one of the biggest things you can win at the Oscars. And speech was interesting, and
then he's partying afterwards, like nothing happened.
Now I've heard that they were backstage yelling at each other and all these things,
but he won't be there next year.
He removed himself from the academy, and apparently there's things that came out. They asked him to leave once it happened. He said
removed
no.
himself.
And then now once he's
resigning from a job, you're going to get fired.
Right,
but it's
hey,
fine.
He stepped away. I will say this: there's one thing that I do want to say. Yet again, I don't want to keep talking about this, but I will say his apology has been awesome. We don't see that a lot in this woke culture of, hey, don't say anything if you're right, if you believe you're right, all that stuff.
Yeah.
The way he's come out and apologized to Chris, apologized to the Oscars, apologized, like that has been kind of cool.
That
to
is cool
because that's very uncommon.
One of the things that drives me absolutely crazy is like this president and the past president. They never apologize. They never are wrong. They never say, "Well, I was wrong about that." I mean, it's like you just never hear that.
Right.
Nobody ever in the public eye wants to admit that they're wrong, and it's refreshing when somebody does.
Yeah, that's one thing I've heard that's been kind of cool is people are like almost shocked. Like, wait, he came out and apologized?
Yeah.
Like it's kind of making people take a step back like, oh, you can own your actions and apologize.
Yeah.
Which I think has been a lost art in our culture a little bit. So
I agree.
But anyway, I don't know if you have any other thoughts on Will Smith and Chris Rock, but
I mean, no, we don't want to waste time
so
on that
many
because like you said though, I listen to sports talk a lot, and even on there they're talking about it.
It's everywhere,
it's like everywhere, and talking about how he went up there, and it's kind of like I don't think Chris knew what he was going to do, obviously,
no.
but the slap was kind of like boom, like like that was a move, like it was he had no time to respond,
right.
Yeah, so there's a sports element of that.
Yeah.
Right.
I think the thing that made us realize it was real was Chris's response. He didn't know what to do afterwards. And like I would imagine because he was only maybe a minute into his monologue that he probably had more planned to say. So he was very caught off.
Would you have cried?
Probably.
If I walked up and slapped you,
would have cried.
If you were up and I didn't like the way you were preaching, I walked up and slapped you in the face.
I have respect for Chris Rock for keeping it together because he got slapped by a man much bigger than him.
Yeah, true.
So it's kind of impressive on that front. But anyway, let's move on. So at Refill last week, I got the chance to lead a breakout session.
Yes.
That was titled Leading Strong in a Post-Christian Generation, which is a very fancy title for what we're going to talk about. And after doing that, it was actually before you kind of brought up like, hey, what if we did that on the podcast?
Well, yeah, if we recorded last week, we talked about doing it in advance, but then, we didn't.
But I've done it now. So
okay,
it's
so now
happened.
you probably have even more to say.
A little bit. So I
how did it go?
Good. I thought it was good.
Did you have like 30-some people in there?
I didn't count, but I think
but it seemed like that was cool. And I heard good things from the people that went.
Yeah, I think it went well. And I think your wife was she was in there, and she was talking to me afterwards of like, I think it started a really good conversation. Okay. Like it got a lot of people thinking. And so I figured, hey, that would be kind of cool to do that here on In All Things and maybe get some people thinking about this conversation. We might not answer every question or come up with all the answers to this problem. But yet again, if we get the ball rolling, I think that's a good way to start.
You just said problem. What is the problem?
Okay. Wow. Good way to start. Did you have any prep on this? Or?
No. Is that a good way to start?
That is a good way to start.
Because
we got to define the problem, right? And so I'm going to say that word a lot. This is post-Christian. Post-Christian America is what some people say. Okay. Post-Christian generation, post-Christian world, all the same thing. Tim Keller. A lot of you guys have heard the name Tim Keller before. Right. He actually describes it the best way that I've heard. So he describes it as a set of dots. Okay, so everybody up until pretty much this point has had a set of dots. And those dots are maybe what parents have imparted onto their children. You and I both had them of kind of, okay, I have a general belief in who God is. I have a belief that there is an afterlife. I have a belief that I'm not perfect. I have a belief, like this is kind of and they're all spread out and they could look different, but these set of dots that most people are raised with. And so what church was for a really long time was if we can get them to our services, we'll connect the dots for them. All we need is that moment of drawing the lines between these dots and boom, you're good to go.
Right.
And so it's taking this, I think he calls it like furniture, like basic furniture of a Christian worldview. Most people had that for a really long time because we were in a Christian world. I mean, you're older than I am, but it was weird probably growing up if people didn't go to church. Is that true? To some degree.
Or believe in God at least.
Right.
Yeah, go occasionally.
And I would say even like maybe your parents, it was even more, oh, you don't go to church or you don't believe in God.
Yeah, surprising.
Right. And so that obviously we know that we've gotten further and further away from that standard of everybody kind of being a Christian. We are a Christian nation, right?
Yeah, right.
That's not a shock that we're getting further away from that. It's just, that's where we are.
Right.
But he describes it this way and saying, okay, this is what it used to be, where if we could get a teenager or even an adult in our doors, evangelism was, hey, let me connect the dots for you of why these things matter. And it made sense. But he kind of poses this idea that now what we're facing is a generation that doesn't have those dots to begin with. So that basic furniture is not there anymore. Now it's no longer, yes, I believe in God. It's, I don't think there is a God. And it's not, I believe in afterlife. It's no, that's this life and that's it. And it's not, oh, I'm not perfect. It's no, I want to be happy. So it's everything has kind of shifted away.
Right. Going to church is not the norm.
No, not at all. And so that's kind of where we are. And so this is the problem, right? And so this problem is that we are now facing a generation. And this is also an interesting part of the conversation is there's nobody listening or watching this that this doesn't affect. Okay. You and me, it affects everybody. Because if you're a parent, your students are living in this world. If you are a lead pastor, this is the generation of the church in the future, right? It's the church now.
It is.
And if I'm a youth pastor, obviously it's important. And so this conversation really does kind of fit every type of person because this is, I believe this is the world we're in. So that's how Tim Keller describes it. I've heard other people describe it other ways, but I think that's a simple way to put it. Is there was these dots, we would show up, we would connect them, the dots are no longer there. What do we do?
Yeah.
And so then it comes into the conversation of generations, and kind of how generations' motivations, what motivated them to go to church, to believe in God has changed. And so I'm going to read some of those examples here. The meaning of life used to be a good person. And that was kind of the baby boomers, Generation X, that kind of stuff. So the motivation was they wanted to be a good person because maybe they were raised in a generation that kind of had that desire. They knew what the moral law was, the moral code. They knew what was right and wrong, all that stuff. So their desire, what motivated them was to be a good person. And so churches for a long time would speak to, okay, well, let's use guilt a little bit to show you that maybe you're not such a great person, but here's how you can be. And so a lot of people bought into it because their motivation as a generation was to be good. And then it moved with millennials to be your true self. They're true to yourself. And so that's when things started to come, hey, follow your heart, do what you want, do what makes you happy. That's when those kind of ideas were introduced. And so then the church kind of had to switch its approach. Right? If the motivation is no longer generally just to be a good person, now it's to be true to yourself. Okay, well, we need to show them what truth really is. We need to show them, what it means to be true to yourself and all those kind of things. So then evangelism and church kind of changed their way. Now we're at Gen Z, right? Which is the current generation. If you don't know, that's what they're called. And the motivation now is to create your own self. So whatever I say about myself, that is who I am. And so I want to create my own self. Even if my family's never been that way, I want to create myself. And so I identify with whatever I want. I say whatever I want. I come up with my own truth. I do all of those things. Because my generation's motivation is to create my own self, to belong somewhere. Okay, so that's kind of where we are.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on generation's motivations?
No, that sounds pretty accurate. I mean, we've been hearing this for a while, watching it. So the church is usually a little slow to react, and that's part of the problem. And that doesn't change the message or it doesn't change the gospel. It doesn't change any of that, but it does change the way you approach it. So that's where we're at. Yeah,
and that's one thing that I kept coming back to throughout the whole breakout that I got to do is I kept saying, okay, yes, I'm presenting all of these things, and some of you are like scratching your heads and wondering, okay, well, this is a little bit hopeless, but I'm not at any point asking us to give up the truth. Right?
No, and I think that's where the confusion is. I think there's many churches that don't change anything at all in their approach, and they believe steadfastly they are doing the absolute right thing by not, and they call it not compromising, and they look at others that they think have compromised because they do things differently. And I think it's a danger of just being pragmatic about everything. So, well, if we get the results, then it's worth it. Well, we got to not compromise or water down the truth. But it's, I think, harder, trickier than it's ever been because we don't want to lose this generation because we're just stubborn about our ways, but we can't water down anything that the Bible teaches. So here we are.
Here we are.
Yeah.
And then there's this other idea that goes along. Yet again, we're still kind of describing the problem here before we get to some solutions. But there's another problem. So yes, the generation's motivation has changed. And so the way of evangelism, the way of getting people to church, it doesn't work the way it used to. It works sometimes. This isn't an all or nothing thing, but it's changed. So we gotta kind of come up with a new approach to this generation to speak to their need to create their own self. Okay, and then on top of that, people have started to talk about three big shifts that they see in the church in America. So 3 big shifts that they feel like has changed as we've become more and more post-Christian. Okay. So the first one is we've moved from the majority to the minority. So back in the day, like we've already talked about and established, it was the majority to be a Christian, at least to believe in God, at least to go to church. We've moved away from that.
Right.
There's a statistic that says 49% of millennials and 65% of American adults still identify as Christian in national surveys.
Yeah.
But a recent in-depth study by the Barna Group, I don't know if you've ever heard of Barna, but think tank for all things Christian. And they put the number of young adults who are quote unquote resilient disciples, which I would translate as maybe committed, to 10%. So that's where we're kind of standing with young adults right now. 10% of young adults in America would say that they are actively committed, resilient disciples of Jesus.
Young adult would be defined as under
probably
30.
18 to 30.
18 to 30, yeah. 1 out of every 10. That's about what I would.
Well, yeah, you would say.
Yeah.
To me, that low number is shocking.
That's in our culture, like committed. Like that doesn't mean.
Doesn't mean not going to church. Like that just means like committed to following him.
Yeah, committed to following him. Yeah, I really wonder how much higher the number is when you go to 30 and 40-year-olds.
Yeah.
I think there's been so much of a sales pitch on an easy believism. We've talked about that before, but this just pray a prayer, go to church a couple times a year, and we're good. And that to me is not a follower of Christ.
Right.
I mean. So.
Well, yeah, and I also think too, and we got into this a little bit when I did the breakout. I wasn't even planning on going here, but I think because those dots are no longer there, that's honestly because so many generations that are now parents of students and kids, like they don't even have the framework to raise their kids in a Christian household, or they don't want to. And so now this generation doesn't even know what to believe or what it means to believe because they're biblically illiterate, if we're being honest. And and there's adults who are for sure, but that's we're seeing that more and more of students who are like, I don't even know what the Bible says, to be honest. Like I like, at least for me growing up, and I credit this to my parents because there's a lot of people that I went to high school with that definitely didn't have these dots either.
Right.
But like I at least knew the stories, and I knew who Jesus was, and I knew what the Bible was, and I knew these ideas.
I mean, they had you here at church almost every week. Right. I mean, and they talked about it at home. Yeah. I mean, and
I would imagine you had the same thing.
Well, of course, but that's not the experience. That's not the normal experience.
Not at all.
No.
And now we're living in a world where it's like, hey, we'll give up really anything like just to replace church. Like, oh, you got a sports game, or you got a vacation, or anything comes above church.
Yeah, I sadly, I don't know why, on Twitter this morning, I was just looking, and there was a post of somebody who said, I finally broke free from church. I'm no longer attending church with my family anymore, and it's the greatest feeling in the world. No longer under the pressure, no longer under the guilt. And then all the comments under it were like, man, congratulations. It's such a good feeling, isn't it? You can be a follower of Christ without going to church. And that is a mindset. I mean, that is very prevalent today, and COVID didn't help. Because people believe that you can really be a full-on follower of Jesus without ever going to church. And that's, I think so. There's so much of that today. And then, of course, people that are saying the opposite that don't agree. But I think the trend is what you're talking about. The trends is just, it's not getting better.
Right.
So here we are, and this is what we do for a living. We work for a church, and we're trying to reach people for Christ. And I think that the challenge is just growing and growing. And if we just put our blinders on and pretend like everything's fine, and we're going to miss out on the next generation. That's why a lot of churches have gotten so old, and they're like dying, is because they have just put their blinders on and we're like, well, we're going to keep doing it the same way, and they just need to get with it. Well, they're not going to get with it. They're going to either go elsewhere or not go. And it's sad.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like with this conversation of trends and where the world is going, like, and going back to the parent conversation for a moment, I know we've talked about this before, but maybe just like if you're a parent listening, like every time you choose not to go to church on a Sunday or not make your kids, I mean, there's a certain degree, there's a healthy degree of having your kids go with you. And every time you choose not to because, oh, I'm tired, or, oh, we have this, or, oh, I want to cook this breakfast. I don't know. Like, what are you ingraining in those kids' heads? You know?
I know. I am amazed, and I don't, I'm not thinking of anybody in particular, but I am amazed at how many people that are followers of Christ that, one, at the game time decision, Sunday morning, how do we feel? What do we want to do?
How was last night?
Yeah. There's a late night. There's a late basketball game on. Probably just sleep in. Maybe I'll watch it online at 11. I don't know. Maybe. And then the parents that come and don't make their kids go with them, like, where's your kid? Oh, they don't really want to. They didn't want to come this morning. Like, what? Like, what's going on? I mean, I don't understand it. Right. Of course, I know where I work. I know what I do for a living, but that wasn't the way I grew up. My parents weren't working for the church. It was just the norm. Like, and I don't know where this is heading. I don't like where it's heading. It makes me nervous.
Yeah,
yeah,
definitely. And I think, it's easy for us to, sit here and, you got to get your people here, but like, we can only do so much. Like there's so much biblical precedent for what parents' responsibility is in the home. Like you are the defining standard of, for the most part, what kids are going to do in the future and how they're going to grow up to be. Are they going to see church and faith in God as a standard and a priority in their life, or is it going to be like, oh, well, my parents went once every other month, so I'm going to do the same thing. Like, it's just interesting.
And then there's the stories of people and students that you have that come to the well every Sunday night whose parents don't go to church.
Absolutely.
So they're making the choice to figure it out for themselves, and they want to be there, and they want to learn about God. So that's encouraging.
Yeah, we're going to get to that in a moment.
Yeah, okay,
but
all right.
There's a lot of things about this generation that are super encouraging.
Okay.
But we got to get through maybe some of the defining problems first. Next, so first one is majority to minority. Second one is a place of honor to a place of shame. So for a long time, like being a pastor was like, oh my gosh, like you're the pastor? Like, thank you so much for everything that you do. And now it's kind of like, oh, you're a pastor? I guess I shouldn't drink and talk around you. Like, like it's changed a little bit to this place of from honor to shame. And like if you go and look at what America was founded on back in the day, it was honorable to be a Christian. If you go walk around downtown cities, there's scriptures ingrained on old buildings, and that's not a thing anymore. And like Ivy League schools, I don't know if you know this.
Yeah,
most of them were created to be pastoral teachers, like seminaries, basically.
Absolutely.
And now we are so far removed from all of those things.
Absolutely.
So we've moved from a place of honor to a place of shame. A lot of our ideas, whether it be on abortion, whether it be on gender, whatever, has now moved to like the place of the moral low ground. Like now when we speak up about those things and we talk about those things, it's like, how dare you say that?
Yes.
But for a while, that was like the honorable position.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you said majority earlier. It reminded me, just with my roots at Liberty University, Jerry Falwell Sr. was known for one of the big things he did was started something called the moral majority way back. And it was a movement to have the voice of Christians heard in the government. And one of the biggest things was about standing up for pro-life. But now to talk about those things, it's like, you're still talking about that? Like we've moved past that in our culture today. And so anyway, I think the whole idea of honor and shame, like I've always been as a pastor in a place where I don't feel comfortable when people hold me in this high standard and or not standard, but high esteem and use titles. If people feel like they want to call me pastor, that's fine. But I like being called Steve. That's my name, And I think, Pastor Steve, if you don't feel comfortable calling me by my first name, but Reverend Markle makes me want to throw up a little bit, but I get it. The point isn't about titles though, but I do know in other cultures that there's much more honor given to people that have given their life to ministry and all, but no, and that's not saying that I don't feel honored by the people in our church, and people are very kind and very appreciative and all that. That's not what we're saying.
General,
we're talking about the culture,
trend,
the way the culture looks at pastors and Christians are just kind of like, oh, you're a Christian. Oh,
right.
It's not a honorable thing.
Right. And
Correct.
number 3 is from widespread tolerance to a rising hostility. So yet again, going back to the moral low ground, like now we're seen as part of the problem a little bit, where there are those posts of, hey, I stopped going to church and I feel amazing. And you're going to see threads and threads of people like, I did the same thing a month ago and I've never been happier. And don't get me wrong, there is trauma and horrible things that happen in church and church leadership. Hear me when I say that.
There's plenty of stories out there.
We're not excusing any of those things, but it's still this idea, like we have moved from this place of, like, generally up until this point, pretty much in this generation, like people who weren't Christians, they were at least tolerant with what we believe. They were like, okay, you might be a little bit weird. Like we don't understand some of the things that you believe and the things that you say, and it's very Christianese and whatever. But now it's like, no, we disagree with you openly, and you can't say those things anymore and have those stances. We've kind of
that has been one of the to me one of the most frustrating things in our culture is that we are demanded to be tolerant of everything that everybody else believes, but nobody is supposed to be tolerant of what we believe, what our biblical beliefs are. Like, we're supposed to shut up and be quiet while everybody else says what they believe, and we're supposed to be tolerant of that. And to a point, like tolerance to me, I mean, like, yeah, I respect your opinion, or you have the right to have a different opinion. I don't expect non-believers to believe what the Bible says and agree with my views, and I'm tolerant that our world has other views and that our country allows that. I'm tolerant, but just what about the tolerance the other direction? Of, can you not be tolerant of listening to what I have to say and what the Bible teaches and what our country has been founded upon a long time ago? But yeah, things have changed.
Yeah. So
yeah.
So what do we do, Steve? What do we do with these things we talked about, these three big shifts, these generation motivations, all this stuff? What the dots that are missing?
You're going to tell them.
What do we do? What's the
Throw our hands up in the air.
That's it. We walk away and we quit. And,
no, I think we don't do that.
But here's the thing. With generations' motivations changing, like I said, with the generation that used to be good, then the approach was, hey, we can guilt them a little bit and show them how to actually be good. This moral law that everybody held was the Bible for a long time. And then it moved to, okay, I need to be true to myself. So then we showed them, okay, well, here's the standard of truth. Well, now truth doesn't even mean what truth means, because we live in a post-Christian world where, hey, if you define truth and it sounds good, then that's your truth, right? But now the approach is identity. So because we are now in a generation, in a world that is seeking to define themselves and create their own selves, and therefore they're constantly looking to belong and identify with something that agrees with them, something that is trustworthy. Like, that's what they're looking for.
Right.
So now our approach with the gospel, with evangelism, with all these things, is to show them where true identity comes from.
Sure.
And so that's kind of where the shift has gone. And yet again, Tim Keller, these kind of voices agree with this, that like now the approach when you present the gospel or the truth to somebody who is in this generation, you need to start from this place of, I know you're seeking to identify and create your own self, but let me show you this identity that somebody else has already earned for you and can't be taken away. That's attractive to this generation. They're like, oh, interesting. Like, I can almost... That's what Tim Keller, the quote is, Christianity is the only identity that's received and not achieved. Because of what Jesus did, we receive this identity as children of God. It's not something that we earn.
Correct.
And if you can communicate that in a way of love to this generation, they're kind of like, oh, okay. So I can belong to this community and this group that, and Jesus gives me this identity that is mine. Like, okay, I can kind of see this. Right. And so that's kind of how the approach has changed, which is interesting. And so now evangelism needs to provide the who they become in Jesus, or who they are, who Jesus says they are. That's kind of the starting place now if we want to reach this generation, is speaking to the identity that they can have in Jesus. So I don't know if you have any initial thoughts on that, but I think it's super interesting.
No, I think it even goes back to the sermon yesterday about the achieving idea is something that I think most of us have struggled with in life. Like, what do I have to do? Like the young rich ruler, what do I have to do to be saved? What must I do? And it's not about that. Right. It's about accepting the identity and the idea. I think too, like, they're not, this younger generation is not just embracing what their parents or grandparents believed. No. They're not. No. But the whole idea in the past has been you inherit it. Like, if my parents were Baptist, then I'm Baptist. If they were Presbyterian, I go to Presbyterian. And if they're not anything, then who knows what I am. Yeah. But now it's like, I'm not worried about what my parents believed or what they did, and guilt doesn't work anymore. That's why, why did we go to church? And when I was a kid, we went to church Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday night, and there was so much guilt involved of skipping one of those. Yeah. And now people come to church once a month and don't have any guilt.
No, it doesn't matter.
No, because they have other stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
So it's just, it doesn't work. It's just changed.
So identity. Yeah.
Real quick, I want to fly through Lifeway presents 6 truths to prepare the church for a post-Christian America. So for those of us listening, for us on staff, and you as a pastor, I want to hear how you respond to some of these things. Okay. But these are 6 truths, 6 ways to prepare ourselves if this is really the world that we're living in. Okay. So number 1, they say that true life-on-life relationships are needed. So their whole point in this is it's time that we stop just seeing each other for an hour on Sunday mornings, but we need to really get outside the church and do life with people that are Christians. Like vulnerable, open, deep life with people, because that's the only thing that's going to withstand the test of post-Christian.
Sure, I agree.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah,
that's pretty straightforward.
Absolutely, yeah.
Number 2, they say we need to contextualize when appropriate, which is a churchy word.
Yeah.
But their whole point is, in a post-Christian world, if that's where we're living, then most of the world outside of the church is going to see the church as weird or uncomfortable or awkward and not something they want to be a part of. So we need to do our best to contextualize and meet them where they are. So if we're in our jobs, which for us, this is our job,
right.
but if you're at your job, at your school, at Chipotle, wherever you are, we need to contextualize and understand that, hey, just inviting them to church, they're going to say, well, I don't have a good experience with church, or I haven't heard good things about church. So we need to find a way to maybe not incentivize, but we need to like come up with ways to show them and contextualize what church could be, or what Christianity provides for them. That's kind of the second point.
That sounds good. I don't know.
It's hard to do. Yeah.
What that means exactly. I mean, I understand it, but I made me think about one of the things that I heard Andy Stanley say a few years ago, and I think it's really good, is when you're talking to people that are not Christians, they don't care. Like, you can't just say, well, the Bible says this, the Bible says this in our preaching and teaching. And like, I've learned too, it's important, like you're preaching from the book of James, James, the brother of Jesus, the one who knew him personally, it was part of his family, who watched him give his life and all that. This is what he said. And it doesn't take away that it's in the Bible. It is, and it's God's word. We know that. But sometimes contextualizing in that way of like, these are real people. And like, it's not just, up here, I'm putting down my fists. Here's the Bible. You must believe it. But listen for yourself. I don't know.
The quote from Lifeway says this: in a post-Christian environment where many find worship services awkward, we need to go into their environments, not expect them to come into ours. They say the church buildings and programs all have their purposes, but in a post-Christian environment, we need to think outside of the box to help people find Jesus.
What does that mean, going into their environments?
Like, like we were talking about last week of just things we could do in the community. Like here in Pickerington, we haven't seen a church take on the community full on, right?
Right.
And what would that look like? I think that would reach a lot of people. And okay, like they're coming to us, not expecting us just to come to them on Sunday mornings. Like, I think that's kind of where things are shifting.
Yeah.
The third one is, this is just a reminder, yet again, these are almost reminders for the church as we head into a post-Christian world, is the kingdom of God is for sinners. So this is something I think we all need to keep in the back of our minds. One thing that religious people were really mad at Jesus for was that the fact that he spent time with people that they didn't think were worthy of his time.
Right.
And we need to remind ourselves and go back to this simple truth that the kingdom of God, the church, the message, the gospel is for people that need it. It's for the most broken, the most marginalized, the most people that are lost and all those things. And
I know. I even said something yesterday about somebody that came. I was like, I wouldn't have expected them to come to church. Like, that's what church is for the people that you would least expect, and that's what Christianity is for. And the kingdom of God is what we're talking about, building a kingdom. And so, I mean, that's just an obvious reminder, but we need to remember that. It's not about us four and no more. It's about growing, reaching. Yeah.
Lifeway says that, yet again, a Barna research study shows that 60% of those who attend church once or more a week believe this statement: everyone sins a little, but most people are good by nature. So 60% of the church agrees with that statement, which means when we are now living in this world where there is, LGBTQ and all these crazy things, we don't know what to do, because we agree with the statement that, well, almost everybody's good. We're just, by nature, we're good and we sin a little bit. And so if that's been our standard for so long, now when we're seeing these big ideas and these things that everybody's accepting, we're like, I don't even know how to start the conversation, because this seems so different than everybody's good by nature. Right. So it's kind of an interesting thing.
It is. There's things that Luke Bryan's song, "All People Are Good." I believe. I keep that when I hear that song. I'm like, I don't think I agree with that. I mean, I like the idea of it, but it's not right. Biblically. I'm like, when we pull out these verses and share the doctrine from the book of Romans, it's like we are all sinners, and that's our sin nature that we inherited from Adam. And it's not like we're generally going to do the right thing. We have a pull towards sin, and we just, and that's hard though in our culture. People don't want to hear that.
No, not at all.
No, we're good people.
Not at all.
And saying that doesn't mean I think everybody's bad people. I just think that it's the idea, the mindset of like, and that's what the people in church believe. More than half. Yeah, interesting.
Yep. Number 4.
Yeah,
we need to learn how to filter. So Lifeway says what we need to do is we need to learn how to filter information so we can speak God's truth into a broken world. They say with pop-up ads, social media, and hackers, we're naive to think our kids have not already seen something inappropriate. As parents and leaders, we need to teach into these moments. We need to give answers on why God's ways are better. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
I think this maybe the way what they're trying to say here is like, stop with the big Christianese things all the time.
Right.
Find a way to speak in a normal way, which is kind of what we talked about in the last episode of swimming upstream, but not doing it in a way that's not weird, right? Find a way to communicate God's truth and who God is in a way that's not like super out there and abstract, and because the rest of the world is they don't understand that, and it doesn't make sense to them, and it doesn't make sense to me most of the time, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
So find a way to communicate it very plainly and clearly and in normal language, and filter, in a way that the broken world's going to be like, okay, I can kind of understand.
So filter
this.
what we're saying, not what I thought the point was learning how to filter what we take in, what everybody's
I think it's both.
It's both. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's both.
Okay.
So it's speaking into and filtering the things you're taking in, but it's also finding a way to communicate in the rest of the world that they're not going to be like,
it's funny because, as I'm preparing sermons, I have all my past sermons like in files on my computer. So I'll like do a search. Did I ever preach on this before? And sometimes I'll read a sermon I did on the same passage or topic 10 years ago, and I will laugh at my illustration. I was like, wow, I said that, and that really worked back then. The world has changed, and that illustration would be so dumb right now. Nobody would even know what I'm talking about.
Right.
And so we have to constantly be, every time I'm getting up there to speak, and sometimes the last minute, I'm like, does that really make sense? Do people understand that in this culture today? Because that's like an old idea maybe. So I think that's important, and I think it would be stupid, unwise, foolish for us to ignore what we know people are hearing and seeing in our culture and just pretend like that doesn't exist.
Right. Because it does.
It does.
Number 5.
Okay.
Everyone likes stories about Jesus. So we actually brought this up earlier, but this is a reminder as the church heads into more and more post-Christian world. We need to remind ourselves that sometimes a good start is that most people can buy into the stories about Jesus. Like
I think that's
they
why
respond to who he is. So
maybe that's why this series with Mark in the book of Mark is so well received, and I love preaching the stories of Jesus. I think more than anything. More than Old Testament, more than doctrinal stuff, more than topical, just preaching the stories of Jesus are just so exciting. I think it's funny. I thought about this, doing the book of Mark this time of the year leading up to Easter. I was thinking about the next 3 years. You might have an idea where I'm going with that, but I think about Matthew, John, Luke, kind of doing that, on a cycle, because I think it just doesn't get old. And so anyway, I think that's a good reminder.
Yeah.
Everybody in the world,
right.
Even if they, don't believe necessarily the stories are.
Yeah. Somebody could never step foot in the church and they at least know that Jesus is a historical figure.
Yeah, right.
That taught well and was a good guy.
Yes.
So it's like,
right.
if you start there, I think
that's pretty well believed.
Right.
Yeah.
Number 6, last one. This is a very simple one, but they said God is in control, so we don't need to fear. And I think it's, yet again, it's kind of an elementary, okay, great, but like it is a reminder to come back to as you hear these things, maybe a conversation like this, and you're listening and you're like, I am a little bit overwhelmed because it sounds like this world is lost and there's no hope. Like if you're feeling that right now, maybe this is a reminder for you, hey, like God is still in control and he's not shocked by anything that's happening. Not a single thing catches God off guard. It's just not possible.
The big churchy word is the sovereignty of God.
Right.
And like the last 2 years have taught us that, if nothing else. And that's why some people have quit things, because they've given up, they've gotten fearful. There's people that haven't come back to church because of fear. There's people that have given up in ministry because of fear. Anxiety's real, and this has put us through it. We've been through a lot. So, but now when all the stuff we've talked about today, it'd be easy to be like, oh my goodness, what's the point? We might as well do something else.
Right.
But I'm not like, I'm excited about the next 15, 20 years, see what God's going to do at Sycamore and in the church in general, because as long as we embrace the knowledge of the facts of what's happening, I mean, there's hope, and the hope of Jesus doesn't change. It's it's even more needed in a world. So I know it's hard because so many people in the generation older than me, it's like, it's hard for them. It's more because they hold on to the American Christian values more because of, just the way they were raised. And Christian nation. Yeah, and I was growing up in that world, and now it's like not.
Right.
I mean, everything that is legislated, everything that is talked about in the media, it is further and further away from biblical values, from what God taught us, from the Word, from what So we have to live in. It's where we're living in. We're not going to all of a sudden reverse it and make it a Christian nation again.
Right.
I'm like, sorry, that's not happening.
Right.
But I think when, this is churchy probably, but where things are the darkest, the light shines the brightest, something like that. Like we have, I think, even a greater opportunity as we go forward. Mm-hmm. So
I want to close with this because I don't want to end this conversation on like a hopeless note.
No.
and I think that was great what you just said. But I think what we need to understand about this generation, because the dots aren't there, because they're not necessarily being raised in a Christian home, because they're not being raised in a Christian school, because they're not being raised in a Christian nation, if we can get them to see who Jesus makes them, the identity he gives them, and they understand and they believe in him, they really get it. Mm-hmm. They really believe. And I think that's something that is a really unique opportunity that we can lean in as the church, because we haven't really seen that before. Like for me, yet again, I was raised in church, came to church every week.
Right.
It wasn't until I was a sophomore in high school that I got it.
Right.
And when I got it, I got it.
Right.
But I'm seeing 7th and 8th graders and young students get it because it's their faith and they've decided and therefore it's real. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's the most encouraging thing, because like if we can get them to see who Jesus is and understand what truth is and all those things, and they kind of have that light bulb moment, it's not like, oh yeah, they've always got it or whatever. Right. Like they really get it, and that's really cool. And so I think that's just an encouragement, is because this generation is not necessarily Christian. If we can speak to them and be that hope and the truth in the middle of it, and they get it and they understand it, I believe it's a lifetime. Like I believe it's like they really understand it.
I love that.
And some of the questions I get asked by well students, some of the things that I hear, and even students that will make a decision next week, they're serving, next week they're getting involved. Like it's just different than we've ever seen before, and that's encouraging to me.
I mean, you know how much I've always loved youth ministry, even though student ministry, even though I did it for 10 years and haven't been doing it for the last 20. I've been lead pastor, but I loved going to camp with you last year. I love popping in sometimes to the well, because it's so encouraging. And it's like, this is the future. I mean, the future's now, but just seeing they're going, I mean, very few of them are there because their parents are forcing them to come.
Exactly. Yeah.
They're coming on Sunday night, 40 or 50 students, because they want to be there and learn about God. Some might want to see a girl or a boy, but most of them are there for the right reason. Yeah. They have the right motivations. And hey, if a girl or a boy brings them to church, well, hey,
it's a good start, right?
That's right.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. And maybe we'll just close with that thought. Generations change, motivations change. Yeah. The world changes. Truth never changes.
Right. There's so much with this. This could have been a 3-part.
For sure.
But
so
anyway.
Hey, rewind if you need to. That was a lot packed in there. But just know that we're encouraged. Yes. I feel encouraged. Yes. I'm excited about, like you said, what God's going to do. I'm not at all like, well, that's it. We'll just throw in the towel. This is it. It's hopeless. I don't feel that way at all. I feel like, man, we have the opportunity to reach a generation that maybe doesn't necessarily get it at first, but when they get it, game on.
Do.
Like that's awesome.
So thank you for doing that, talk, but also bringing it to this, and for having that passion for our students, because it's key. Because so many people just kind of throw in the towel or say, well, just keep trying to do the things we've always done. But I appreciate that you're always thinking and always innovating, always reading, because things are constantly changing. And so thank you for bringing that to us today. I think it was a great talk.
Thank you. Yeah. If you're listening or watching, let us know what you thought. As always, don't just be neutral on this. Agree, disagree, and take these things into your kids' lives, your students' lives. If you're a teacher, bring it to your class. Whatever you got to do. Like, this is a real conversation.
Yeah, hate mail. We appreciate that.
Hate mail. Do it. Let us know. But we're very excited. This season is coming to a close, so we got a couple more episodes, and that'll be it. But I have some exciting things coming up, conversations that I think will be really good for our church. So, see you guys later. Thanks so much for listening, watching. Let us know what you thought. Have a good week. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the In All Things podcast. Our challenge for you today is to send this episode to one person. Seriously, think of somebody right now that could use this conversation and send it to them. If you have any questions, feedback, or topic ideas, please send them to podcast@sycamorecreek.org, and make sure you follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Sycamore Creek Church so that you can always see what's going on in our world. If this conversation helped you at all, make sure you share it, leave a review, and subscribe so that you don't miss out on a single episode. We love you, God loves you, and we'll see you next week on the In All Things podcast.